Okay, I'm starting a little bit later today, but as we all know the saying, better late than never. Let's start, as we always do, with a bracha, with a blessing. Make a bracha on the coffee. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyah bidvarei. Very good. A little too sweet today, but other than that, pretty good. Where we hold no. Okay, today's topic is not a happy topic. I know we just went into 2021, and it's good to start off on a happy topic. However, the parsha of this past week dealt with this subject, as we are going to discuss in a moment. And once in a while, sometimes this is life. You got to deal with sometimes subjects and topics that are not so happy. So we're going to have to deal with this, and we're going to talk about it. And it also relates to something that happened this past week. So together with the reading of the parsha this past week, we'll discuss this issue. And that is the issue of burial versus cremation. And before we go to that, I also do want to recommend that if you have a moment that you start, I like to start the class. I actually forgot to bring it out, and I don't want to interrupt everybody, but I want to start something new, which is to go ahead and put a little tzedakah. Take a coin, whether it's a quarter, a penny, a nickel, a dime, whatever it is, and put a little bit something into the tzedakah pushka, into the tzedakah box. So we start the day with another mitzvah, in addition to making a blessing on the coffee. Okay, so this past week, and I'm not going to mention any names, of course, because of the privacy, but this past week, I get a message from a dear friend regarding someone who passed away, and sadly, because I was not aware that they were at that this person was at that stage, I thought they were doing okay and doing well. So it was a sad news. And would they, if I could please contact the family to help out, to take care, whatever it is, as rabbis are often called upon, to do the last honors when someone is deceased, someone passes away. So I called the family, and I asked the family, some details, and they said, Rabbi, we would like for you to officiate. And so I started asking some details, and the first thing that comes up is that our relative that's being that I'm asked to officiate for is it will be cremated. So I said, I'm sorry to hear that, because I cannot officiate at a cremation, because cremation is against Jewish law, and therefore I cannot officiate at cremation. I'll do whatever else I can do to help, whether it's the Kaddish or other stuff, but I cannot do the cremation. And then I continue, and I say to them, could you tell me, why is it that you're doing cremation? Perhaps there's something I could do to help. So they said, yeah, it just happens to be that it's just a lot cheaper. It's just a lot cheaper. We cannot afford. So I said, well, if that's the issue, let me see what I can do to help you out. There are different organizations, there are different individuals, there's different people that will gladly assist that someone should have a proper Jewish burial if that is the only issue. So they said, fine, fantastic, Rabbi, we're open. And I made a couple of phone calls, and again, for the privacy of the issue, I don't want to give away too many details. I made a couple of phone calls, and all was set, and the family even agreed, and we were able to arrange, burial for this family. Again, because affordability was an issue, we were able to arrange a burial for the same cost of that cremation would take place. And all was set to go, and I was really, of course I don't want to use the term happy, I felt very fulfilled, because I was able to convince a Jewish family to to perform a proper traditional Torah burial, and that's a very, very gratifying feeling in terms of giving the proper respect to the deceased. And unfortunately, at some point, even after the green light was given, the family pulled back without giving me any explanation. I don't know why, and they opted not to proceed. Possibly they went on with burial through some other avenue. I suspect that that's not the case, so that was the end of what happened last week, which made me think that both based on that story, and also based on the fact that in this past week's parsha, which is Parshas Vayechi, where we read about the passing of Jacob, our forefather, we read about the great efforts that Joseph went to make sure that his father, both by Jacob's request and Yosef's efforts to go up to Canaan from the land of Egypt, and to make sure that his father Jacob received a proper burial. So, and the Torah tells us how much effort was put into that by Yosef, that he went ahead, he left Egypt during a time where Yosef was the pillar that kept all of humanity basically in that region, Egypt being the superpower. And Yosef, and it was during the years of famine, and Yosef was so critical in making sure that everything continues and runs smoothly and so on, that Yosef, nevertheless, personally, not only by sending messengers, which he could have done, he was the viceroy, personally made sure to go ahead and see to it that Yaakov had a proper burial. So I thought that, again, even though it's not a hyper topic, and one of the topics nobody likes to talk about is death and death-related issues, it's always better to talk about we all like, and the way it should be, to talk about life and talk about happy things and simchas, joyous occasions. But once in a while this needs to be done, and more so now than ever before, because whereas probably 20 or 30 years ago, very, very few Jews had a cremation. Everybody, burial was sacred, as it should be, and that was the standard amongst Jews. Now, statistically, what I'm being told, based on what I'm hearing and research, as much as 30% and maybe even more of Jews, which is a reflection of society in general, are opting for cremation. So it's important to address that, because burial and the proper interment of treatment of the deceased, although it's not the focus of Judaism, because Judaism, of course, focuses on life and mitzvahs, and doing good deeds and helping others, but nevertheless, at the same time, Judaism paid and pays so much attention to the proper, respectful burial of our loved ones. In fact, when it came to Moses, the first leader of our people and the greatest of our leaders, it was God himself that the Torah tells us involved himself in burial. At the end of the Torah, it tells us the way God himself, Vayikbar oisoi bagai, oisoi, as Rashi tells us, refers to God himself. God himself involved himself in burying Moshe Rabbeinu and burying Moses, our teacher. So, therefore, it is definitely needs to be addressed. And if I can have the success here of convincing even one listener to properly burial, and I would say Jewish or non-Jewish, to go ahead and do a proper burial of a loved one, as the Torah mandates, this class will have been worth it. And I will deviate to something happy for a moment. If you want to read something which I think was written very well, and something happy about the transition from 2020 to 2021, I want to give a plug here to my nephew, Rabbi Yankee Denberg, who wrote a very, very uplifting, beautiful article on his Facebook page regarding the sort of transition from 20 to 21. I recommend that if you have a moment, you read the article. It's really a nice and uplifting article. So I turn you there for the uplifting part that you might want to get here. This is not a happy topic, but nevertheless an important topic. So some of the reasons, it's not possible within the scope of this class here, Facebook, where we keep it somewhat on the shorter end, to go through everything and all the reasons for burial versus cremation. But to touch on a couple of the points, and again, if you have any questions, of course, you're welcome to type in the questions. Hopefully I'll see it and I'll try to address it. So some of the reasons given for why people opt for cremation versus, let me turn the phone this way, why people opt for cremation versus burial, there are various reasons given. One reason that is given is, of course, one of the primary reasons is cost. Cremation typically is a good few $1,000s less than burial. And that is a true statement, sort of difficult to argue with, because that is the truth. That is, if cost is the only reason for you to want to do a cremation. That's one. We'll address all these reasons. That's number one. Number two, the reason why people sometimes opt for cremation is because burial is sort of outdated, and more, if you look at things from a sort of environmental friendly perspective, then why take up land for the dead? It's better to leave sort of the land for the living, and the dead, there's no reason for them to take up the land which is needed for the living. Also, the process of decomposing is detrimental to the land, etc. It's more up to date today. You go ahead, you burn the body. It doesn't have to takes 1, 2, 3. It's not something that has to for weeks or however long it takes to decompose. It's more up to date, environmentally friendly. Another reason that's given is that today, it used to be that basically you lived in the shtetl, you lived in the village, you lived in the same place for tens or hundreds of years. Okay, so you had a burial place we would visit. But today that everybody's mobile, it actually makes more sense that you put your loved one into an urn and something that you could take with you. So let's address some of these things and then talk about why Judaism Torah wants you to have a burial. So first and foremost, I want to make it clear, because I've looked, when you type in onto the web, when you type onto the internet, you type into Google, you type in Judaism, burial versus cremation. So one of the first things that will pop up is usually some of the funeral homes, as they are the most common go-to place when it comes to burial. And of course, they will approach it purely from a profit standpoint and a service standpoint. In other words, they are not the authorities on what Jewish law says. They are the authority on how to service that which you want, and they'll do so for a price. And that's where they're coming from. So the last place you should look for what is right from a Jewish perspective is the funeral homes, cemeteries, and so on, as that is not their area of expertise, and that's not what they're here to service, is to tell you what is the most sacred, proper Jewish way. Oh, that's point number one. So therefore, when you want to know what is the Jewish way, The Jewish way, as I always repeat, the Jewish way is what the Torah tells us. That's who and how we make decisions of what Jewish is. The Torah, which means the written and the oral Torah. The Torah as it is elaborated and explained in the Talmud. Now, so having said that, the Torah clearly, in creating man, says the following: Ofar ato ve'el ofar toshuv. You are of dust. God created man. He gathered dust from the earth, and he went ahead, or he gathered earth, and he went ahead, and he blew within him a spirit of life. V'haruach toshuv elikim, says King Solomon. Then when the spirit, after 120 of a good and happy and healthy life, when the spirit, when the neshama, when the soul returns to the Creator, so it says v'haruach toshuv elikim, the soul returns to God, and then at that point the body is returned where it is taken from, as everything has its cycle. So it goes back to earth, and that's where it is meant to be interred, as the Torah says in. Let me feed my body for a moment and take a little drink of coffee over here. And that is the process of what needs to happen. Now, let me explain part of the reason for this. Now, we have very clearly, in fact, it's a mitzvah. When the Torah talks about people who have sinned and they deserve capital punishment, the Torah says that after they've received their punishment, kavor tikberenu, you have to bury the person's body into the ground. Meaning, even someone who is so sinful that they get the ultimate punishment, nevertheless their body has to be treated with respect. And let me explain why the Torah, from somewhat of a Kabbalistic perspective, a Hasidic perspective, why this is so important. And this has to do with how the Torah views our physical body. There's a lot of points here that need to be mentioned. Hopefully we'll get them all in. First and foremost, and this is a general approach to life, we do not own ourselves. We have certain ownership that the Torah, which means God, grants us, but it is limited to what the ownership God grants us. Ultimately, both we, our soul and body, belong to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, belong to God, our Creator. Which is, by the way, one of the reasons why it is forbidden to mutilate your body. It's forbidden no, the word slips my mind, to have tattoos and so on. But it's my body. Yes, it's your body up to a certain extent. It's your body up to a certain extent, but it does not override the instructions that God, the Creator of the body, has given to us. We owe our body and our soul and our very being to God Almighty. Hashem says you have to bury your body. So your decision is not your decision. I don't know how to say it like more politely or more politically correct. And therefore, in fact, that doesn't minimize the value of your body. It actually increases tremendously the value of the body, that God Almighty, your Creator, says, I gave you a body, and the body that I gave you is so valuable that you could only do mitzvahs with your body. You cannot do mitzvahs just with your soul. You cannot put on tefillin with your soul. Your soul needs a body to fulfill the biblical mitzvah and desire of Hashem. You cannot light Shabbat candles. You cannot fulfill, if you're a woman, going to the mikveh, the laws of family purity. All this has to be done with the body. There is, your value of your body is limited to your finite understanding. And if one day you decide, I want to, it's time, I want to, God forbid, do away with my body. Says God to you, no. You know what? Your body is infinitely valuable. It's far more valuable than you could even appreciate and understand. So as a result of that, when a person passes away after 120, the Torah says the body now has to be treated with the utmost respect. To give you an example of how much respect we accord the body is that we give it the same respect that we give to a Torah, for example, which has become non-kosher because it cannot be fixed anymore, also is not allowed to be burnt. It has to be buried in the body. This is the way, in the ground. This is the way the Torah has designed sort of the most respectful way of treating something that is sacred. Whether it's a pair of tefillin, whether it is tzitzit, whether it's a Sefer Torah, and whether it is the human body, which is the medium of how you could fulfill mitzvot, God's command, giving charity, helping, hugging another human being, etc. All that can be only done with the body, and therefore God says, don't opt out for the cheapest way. We don't do things based on its monetary expense. We do things based on its intrinsic holy value. That's the answer, the cost factor. We're making a decision for eternity, how to treat our loved one. And in fact, and I know this is a very difficult thing to understand, if our loved one expressed or even clearly told us they want to be cremated, by Jewish law you ignore that and you still fulfill the will of God Almighty to go ahead and to bury. And this is for two reasons. Number one, it is because anytime you as a parent tell your child to do something that is forbidden by Jewish law. For example, if you tell your child, I want you to eat chazer, to eat pig, your child does not have to listen to you. And part of that is because we believe that the true inner will of a person is to do what's right, even if externally they don't express that. And we believe, and we follow this, that if a loved one says to you, I would like to be cremated, it's because either at the time they were not expressing their inner will, and number two, it's because of lack of education and truly understanding what it is that Torah and God really wants. So, and number three, I would say, is that once a person is deceased and their soul is in heaven, we believe that at that point their inner true will be totally aligned with what God wants, because their soul is now not obscured by some of the world values or cultures which are perhaps different than Torah's, and therefore we believe that at this point your loved one, even contrary to their instructions, will now want you to do the right thing. So I will say like this again, and I want to conclude with a story. It's a fascinating story that happened with me years ago, and I don't remember all the details. Before I get to the story, I want to also say that there's a fellow by the name of Rabbi Doran Kornbluth, I think is his name. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. He wrote a book called Burial versus Cremation, and he did some extensive research, and he found out that actually environmentalists, true environmentalists, actually prefer burial, because what it takes to go through cremation actually is more harmful to the environment in terms of the toxins released versus burial, which is the natural way of decomposing of the body, and as mentioned again and again, the most respectful way. In fact, it was one of the Roman generals, Sitaurus, I think was his name. I forget all these names. I'm not good with remembering names. I'm not good with remembering names of people I meet sometimes now, never mind someone from 2,000 years ago, marveled at some, when he came back and reported on some of the things that he saw about the Jewish people, and he highlighted just a couple of things. One of the things he marveled was the respect of how they treat the dead. Whereas then the pagans and the heathens would of course burn, which is where cremation comes from. It comes from paganism. It comes from heathen observance and so on. The Jews always treated the dead as the Bible, as the Torah tells us, that dust you are, from dust you were taken, to dust you shall be returned. So why would we in today's day and age not want to do to the soul, which the Zohar, Jewish mysticism, people are into Kabbalah, and anything that's Kabbalistic Zohar we get very excited about. The Zohar and Jewish mysticism by extension tells us that the soul is not fully at peace until the body which housed the soul is put to its proper respectful rest, which is one of the reasons we try not to push off burial. We try to do it immediately on the same day or the day after. I know this has also become what I call an American machla, an American sickness, that sometimes we wait 5 days, 6 days, 7 days till we bury. That is not the Jewish way, because the soul cherishes and values so much the body, because it recognizes more than we can in our conscious self, because our limitation of spiritual and Jewish appreciation in this material world, that the soul, however, appreciates so much what the body did for it, that it is not at peace until the body is interred properly. I'll conclude with a story to highlight how important Jewish burial is. And I hope I remember the details. I'm sort of recalling this as I'm saying this story. This goes back, I would say, probably 15 years ago. It was probably, I was still in the office. It was probably 10, 11 o'clock at night. I think it was a Thursday night. I was still in the office at Chabad, finishing up some stuff. And I get a call from a Chevra Kadisha, from a sort of burial society in New York, with the following question. The question was that there is an inmate in New York that has passed away. He's a fellow who has been in jail for years and years, and they are told that he's Jewish, and therefore they want to make sure the Chevra Kadisha was contacted, and they want to make sure that he in fact is Jewish. The reason for that is because they're not 100% sure that he's Jewish, and if he's not Jewish, then there are other sort of services that will take care of the burial, perhaps other religious services. But if he's Jewish, they want to make sure that he gets a proper Jewish burial. The problem was that, or the issue is that I believe he was adopted, and they're not certain that he was Jewish. So they're calling Chabad, because this fellow is originally they're told that he has a relative that lives in Florida, in Coral Springs. So who do you call at 10:30 at night or 11 o'clock? You call Chabad. They called Chabad. And they're asking me if I recognize the name. Do I know somebody who could sort of confirm whether this fellow is Jewish? I said, look, I'll look in my database. I didn't recognize the name offhand, but I'll look in my database, and I will see whether I could, figure it out, whether I could find out this information. Excuse me. So I looked through my database. I do not see the name. I started to call some of the rabbis in town, some of the other local rabbis, and they all tell me that they do not recognize the name. By now it's already quite late. It's already, past 11. So I call up the police department. At the time I was not yet a chaplain for the police department, so it was just a calling to the police department, and I tell them this is my predicament. So, can you perhaps give me the information if there's someone living in town with this name, the cousin's name, and I need, it's important. The police say to me, look, by law, we're not allowed to give out that name. However, what we will do is we will go ahead and we will knock on the person's door. I said, please do so, and here's my number, if you could have them call me. And the police actually went ahead, they followed up, and they knock on this person's door, and I get like this frantic phone call, because the police did not really tell them any details. didn't tell the cousin any details, but I get a frantic phone call because the person was kind of pretty frightened. They're getting a knock on the door at 11 or 11:30 at night by the police department, and the person asks me, "What's the matter?" I said, so I started the conversation, "Are you the cousin of so-and-so?" And there was a bit of a silence on the other end, and sort of like a cold response. And they said to me, "Yes, I'm either a cousin or sibling. I don't remember. I'm definitely a relative. But I really have nothing to do, nor do I want to have." Sorry for that interruption. I have nothing to do, nor do I want to have anything to do with the relative, because this relative of mine has been in trouble with the law, breaking the law for years, and I've basically written them off. I said, "You know what, I understand, but let me tell you what this is about. What this is about is determining whether the fellow is Jewish, because unfortunately they passed away." And I could hear sadness on the other end. It's just a memory that I have that there was sadness at the other end. I think the person was in prison for over 30 years, like sort of in and out. And to make a long story short, we were able to eventually determine that, yes, in fact, we were able to get hold of papers, of adoption documents. I don't remember, again, all the details, but we were able to determine that this fellow was indeed Jewish, and that and as a result, they received a proper Jewish burial by this burial society, even though, like I mentioned before, this person, the Torah, the laws that we learn that a person is a mitzvah to be buried is from someone who receives capital punishment. To tell you and to use the expression of the Talmud that a person, even the wicked, are filled with mitzvahs, like the seeds of a pomegranate, the Talmud tells us, which highlights the value and the tremendous effort that throughout Jewish history we have put into making sure somebody receives burial. To highlight that from another perspective, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who is considered the holiest individual of the holiest individual, on Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day, as he's about to enter in the holiest of the holy, in the holy temple, if he encounters what's called a met mitzvah, a person who died, that there is nobody available to take care of their burial, he stops what he's doing and he becomes ritual impure, which would not allow him to continue the services, and he deals with the burial personally. It's Yom Kippur, it's the holiest day of the year. The guy could wait. Who cares? It doesn't even matter who the person was. It's a met mitzvah, it's an individual. We don't even know who that person is. He interrupts, he stops the services, and he goes ahead and he takes care of the burial, not cremation. He takes care of the burial. That's what kind of a highly important mitzvah it is, to treat the body, the deceased, with such utmost respect. And for me, when I received that phone call, and I was able to assist in some way to make sure that this person in prison, a lowlife by all standards in terms of, sadly, the choices that the person made of how to live his life. And nevertheless, this was a real mace mitzvah. It was a real met mitzvah. It was a real mitzvah to go ahead and see to it that a person got a proper burial and was treated with the utmost dignity. So I hope, we will conclude, I hope that this class sheds some insight into why you should do a burial. To sum it up, it's the way the Torah says we treat ourselves and we treat our loved ones. It's the Jewish way. There's no other way. It's the Jewish way, and been so since the beginning of mankind, since the beginning of Judaism. It is what even the Romans understood was something unique and important to the Jewish people. It is, unfortunately, someone who goes through a cremation, there's problems about that person being buried or the ashes being buried in a Jewish cemetery. The argument about cost is not an argument on two reasons. Number one, often if someone can truly not afford, Jewish funeral homes or at least other organizations will assist. Number two, cost should not be a factor in how we do things if it's the proper way to be done. Number three, or number four, I don't even know which number I'm holding already, but in terms of mobility, people argue how long is that going to hold for one generation? What happens, you get married, you have 4 grandparents, how many vases are you going to carry around when you move? And for how many generations will that stick around as opposed to a proper burial? Never mind the fact that I believe they said talking about that it takes up space. I think that I think statistically that if we did only burial in the United States for another 10,000 years, it would use up only 1% of the United States landmass, is the statistic that I've heard. But these are all side reasons. The main reason is we are Jews or Gentiles. We follow the way God has instructed us in terms of how the Torah in creation, in the sacred description of creation of man, and that's how we make decisions. That is the proper way to do so. And I hope that all your loved ones should live to 120, that you don't have to deal with this for many, many more years to come. If, for whatever reason, the time has come after 120, I hope that this talk has shed light onto this subject. And if you have any more questions or thoughts, deal with this now. And this is another quick point I want to make. Because even though this is not a happy subject, unfortunately, when someone is dealing with a death, it's very hard to think straight. You're under stress. You have a couple of hours to decide. And then you might make a decision really based on what's easiest, cheapest at the moment, and not necessarily the best for the deceased and even for yourself. So therefore, it is important even once a year to address this subject, so it's done in a proper Jewish way, and that you could think about it and do the proper research when you're not under that kind of sad and tragic duress when losing a loved one. And may the very discussion about this and the resolve to do things in the proper Jewish way bring life, long life to all your loved ones, healthy life, and only good news and happy discussion for us to share in the future. Thank you for watching us. Share these words because they're important words for all. Share it with others. Again, if you have questions, please do send it to me. If you have any topics that you want discussed in the future, please do so as well. I do also want to announce that this coming Sunday, that means a week from now, we will be having our annual matching gift campaign. A big thank you to the gift matchers. Every dollar that you give will be worth double. You'll be seeing some pushing about this, so I apologize in advance. In the next couple of days, it's that time of the year that we do our annual matching gift, and hopefully you could push it to others so that we could continue the very special work that Chabad does in the community. Everybody have a fantastic week, a blessed week, a happy week, a week full of life and good health.